without further ado, again, thank you everyone for joining us, and we'll start with Allison Thomas, who will lead us in prayer.
Thanks, Eric. Please pray with me. Loving God, reconciling God, we thank you for this day and for all our days. Today, we are grateful for nearing the completion of another election season, stressful and divisive, but ultimately reflective of the deep commitment so many of us have to this country and the ideas on which it has been founded. While some of us are celebrating the outcome, we know that others mourn and even dispute it. Help us all recognize the deep truths that hold us together, rooted in a shared hope for peace and progress in community. By your grace, lead us to find better ways to restore that community than the Israelites did with the tribe of Benjamin. We're particularly grateful today for Dr. Davidson and the leadership and insights he's brought to this study of women in the book of Judges. Be with us today as we continue to grapple with these old stories, to find deeper meaning as we continue on our faith journey. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Allison. And now on to Professor Steed Davidson. Good morning.
Good morning, and thank you. Thank you, Allison, certainly for that moving prayer, and which captures a number of the sentiments that we have. So it's the time in which we live, and at the very same time, the book in which we're working, both all of those creating some demands upon us. So thanks for that insightful prayer. I used the title "Stealing Women" for this last section of the book, primarily as we will see what's going on in these chapters, because it's the sense now of capturing women for their use to create other children in another community that is the fix for the excesses of military action that how the book closes out. And we see this happening in two areas, or two communities. Women are taken from Jabesh Gilead, and then women are taken from Shiloh. The mechanisms are different, but the logic seems to be the same. I'm working with, if you recall, chapters 20, chapter 21 of the book of Judges. But in some ways, some people will say, no, we need to back all the way up to chapter 17 of the book of Judges in order to get a sense of what's going on. And let me just do a very quick overview. Chapter 17 gives us the story of one guy, a Levite, Micah, who is serving in a particular household, and we shift into 18 and we get another household stuff with a Levite, and we get to chapter 19, and there's that story of the Levite's secondary wife who leaves him, and then of course ends up being raped, gang raped in a town in Benjamin, and he gets infuriated. He dismembers her, sends her body out. And this is that's chapter 9, and this brings us to chapter 20. And I want to very sort of quickly go through chapter 20, which is the story we come up so far. So here's the rape of the woman that happens in chapter 19. And if we could recall, there is this issue where at the end of the night, she makes her way back to the door of the house where they were staying. And in the morning, he gets up and he sees her lying on the ground outside of the door, and basically says to her, "Get up, let's go." And she doesn't move. He puts her on the animal and takes her back home and then mutilates her body. There is a debate in the scholarship as to whether she is dead as a result of the rape. So when he picks her body up, he is picking up a dead woman, or she is perhaps severely injured but it is his mutilating of her body that kills her. In any event, what happens in chapter 20, he does this, he cuts her up in the body in different pieces and sends it to different tribal groups. And that with his accounting of the events. And it's important to kind of see how he recalls the event versus in chapter 20, it starts around verse 3 going into up to about verse 6, but verse 5 is the heart of it, how he recalls the events versus how it is narrated in chapter 19. He's giving a summary, and he's basically saying, look, this group comes and they try to kill me, right? And they weren't able to, but they raped and killed my woman. Now, what you can see is how he glosses what occurs. It wasn't that they were trying to kill him as such. They were trying to humiliate him. So the threat of rape was issued against him first, but he doesn't report that in his telling. And there are several reasons why he would do this, because of course a man is going to be quite embarrassed to say I was threatened with rape, and because it makes him look weak, it makes him look like a victim. I mean, all of the kind of sexual and gender presumptions that existed at that time, and even in our own, we could see why he would hide that aspect of it. Now, essentially, what he is doing in chopping the body up is now inciting some sense of response from his co-ethnics. And many people read this and recognize here is him in some ways agitating a response and doing it in a careful way that he then lets the people who makes the decision to own it. So he throws all of that stuff out, and in some ways doesn't say what they should do, but he inflames the situation by sending the body parts their way. Of course, what happens is war, because the people are outraged about this, and it's important to now determine what are they outraged about. Are they outraged over the fate of the woman, and therefore they're trying now to find some redress for the woman, or are they outraged on behalf of the man, the Levite himself? But what happens in this chapter is this semblance of national unity. The body of the woman cut in different pieces is the thing that brings the different tribal groups together to try now to create some sense of collective action. If you go back to chapter 5 of the book, there's this military response that Deborah is leading. And what Deborah does is to send out to all of the different tribal groups, basically saying to them, look, we need to gather together to repel this response. And some groups basically calculated, this is not our fight, we're not interested. And others did. So there was no unanimity that happened in chapter 5. Whereas we're seeing, certainly the way chapter 20 is going to presenting it, that there is this wholesale joining together of it. But the body of the woman in its fractured state is what's bringing this. Now, of course, what happens is now this fight, this military response that is occurring, and we see how that works a great deal. With a lot of excesses. There's a whole number. So much of chapter 20 is about the military action. Lots of numbers about how many of the Benjaminites got together, and the ebb and flow of the military action. That's how we get from 20 into 21, and just it has all of the tension and the drama of any good storytelling, because the Benjaminites are seen as the bad guys, and the war starts, and it seems as if they will prevail and they would win. And just when it seemed as if all was lost and the bad guys are going to triumph, the tide turns, and the Benjaminites are all killed. Well, not all killed, but they're severely routed. But when we get to chapter 20, there is very little acknowledgement that the situation with Benjamin comes as a result of war. Chapter 20 starts with the fact, well, we agreed we won't let Benjamin get married to our daughters. We won't give our daughters to Benjamin. So the link is a little uneven there. So what 21 begins with is a ban against Benjamin, that they cannot take women from among the sort of existing tribal group. And then there is this awkward thing, which it's kind of, I'm saying it's awkward, but something that we need to pay attention to, which is important, because what we have are sort of a male set of perspectives that are predominating. This decision is taken. And as a result, the realization is, oh, wow, if we do that, the Benjaminites won't be able to find wives for their sons. So what do we do? Because they will get underpopulated. The goal of unity that we wanted can be eclipsed as a result of a decision we take. Now, rather than reversing, because you would think this, I mean, this is the kind of a thing I learned when I was growing up watching Sesame Street. Because Sesame Street will always have these scenarios where there's a problem, and the answer to the problem is so obvious, but the person who should take the obvious solution keeps digging themselves into more and more problems. And so this is one of those kind of a Sesame Street scenarios. So rather than the tribal group saying, you know what, maybe we should just reverse this ban against the Benjaminites that we took, and just let them have access to our women. What they do to help the repopulation, rather than going that direction, they go in another direction to say, you know what, let's find out who did not help. And so the chapter 20, which told us or gave us the impression that everybody came against a war against Benjamin, then decides who did not. And there's the finger is pointed at Jabesh Gilead. And because Jabesh Gilead did not support the attack against Benjamin, then go kill them. I mean, so it's just how things just spiral out of control. Go kill the men and the women who are of a certain age. And what they discover is, okay, here are 400 women who have never had any sexual experience. And we could see how in verse 12 of chapter 21, there is this leaning into the fact, because there are three different ways we are told this. We are told that they are virgins. They have not known a man, and they have not lain with a man. The three different ways that is talked about. The emphasis is so on thing. Well, let's just capture these 400, and they would then transport it to Shiloh. This is a simple matter of, we have created a problem for ourselves. And rather than acknowledging we have created a problem and solving it the easy way, let's create further problems for other people by capturing and stealing their women. Now, it doesn't end there, because for some reason, there's another community that's targeted, which is the Shiloh community that's targeted. And unlike the military ventures against Jabesh Gilead, this one is going to be much more sophisticated. Let's just wait until the ritual dancing occurs, and let men lie in the bushes, and then just go capture a woman. And find a woman, just grab one, take her, she becomes your woman, get her back. And if the men, which is an important thing, if the fathers object, basically convince them that this is for their good. And this happens, and everyone lives happily ever after. This is how the book goes its way. And it, these are important, kind of disturbing things for us to pay attention to. So let me just go one step further to talk about the end of the entire thing. What this story is, these stories and episodes are pointing out are things which have been consistently practiced across several different.
Has anyone lost audio?
We were out and now we're back on, so I don't know what happened.
Well, only back on 5.
Okay, Steed, are you speaking now?
He might have got.
Yeah, I think he froze.
Yeah, he's probably gonna have to come out and come back in.
Yeah, let me try to get a hold of him.
Okay, this is good news. I think he's dropped,
Okay,
so I think he's
Thank
gonna
you.
try to come back in. It happens. Internet freeze, yep.
Steed, hi, it's Ira Pilchin. Are you trying to log on?
Dr. Davidson, you're muted.
Yeah, there he is.
Okay. All right. I don't know at what point did I lose the connection.
You were on one of your slides.
The happy ending slide.
Yeah, thanks,
We're
Jim.
saying how the book ended.
Okay, let's see. Was it this one or this one? Right.
That's it.
Yep, this one.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. So this was me describing that episode in Shiloh where they go and they do the hide in the bush, get a woman, take her back, and also the conversation that they were supposed to have with the men. Clearly, there didn't seem to be any objections from any of the fathers or brothers in Shiloh, and so they took them, went back to Benjamin with them. They lived their lives, and everything was peaceful in the kingdom. Those are the very last verses of the book. But what I was going on to was to raise the issues related to the exchange of women. That in sort of traditional societies, men negotiate the exchange of women. So fathers negotiate what it is that they're doing, what the fate of their daughters with the men. or with the families. There is that transfer. I say traditional societies, but we could see where these kinds of things still persist today, where there is this idea that a man is still in charge of his daughter's sexuality. So this perception that a man needs to go to the father and ask for his daughter's hand in marriage. That we still have people who believe that is something that should happen, is a reflection of these old sort of traditional patriarchal values. That it is the expectation that a man gives his daughter away, walks her down the aisle ritually and hands her over to another man. All of those are holdovers from patriarchal society. Now that's when things happen in you may want to say a peaceful, ordinary sense. What we have here is no pretense at any of that. It's the actual capturing of women and taking them and moving them from one place to the next against their will. There is no romance. There is no economic stuff. There are colleagues who would say we cannot look at this as anything else but rape, because the women are taken not without their consent. The thing to pay attention to is this is happening within the context of this sort of a movement towards a united nation, if you wish. That there is this fractured nation, and then it becomes whole again. The sense, of course, of this sort of fracture is there all throughout the book of Judges, and it has a heightened reality around chapter 20. But if there is a unity, it's built upon the women. The women are the ones who are now being forced through their bodies to make this type of unity a reality. And what's the basis upon which that is happening? It's the reproductive capacities of women. The concern about Benjamin as raised here is about the depopulation of the tribal group. And the way in which to handle that is in some ways now to capture women, and so that they become in some ways breeders for the tribe of Benjamin. Now I use the language of breeders because we see this turning up in chapter 5. At the end of chapter 5, after the war, there is the Canaanite general Sisera, who got defeated. The poem at the end of chapter 5 has us turn towards his mother, and his mother is waiting in anticipation for her son to return. And her anticipation is that when he returns, he will bring the spoils of war. But he's delayed, and so she's thinking, wow, they're probably dividing things among themselves. And the word that's being used in the original Hebrew, where she talks about, it gets translated that a woman, they're sharing a woman, each soldier is finding a woman for himself or dividing women, but the actual term is womb. That the women who are captured in war and taken away, they're taken not because the value that they have lies in their wombs, the capacity to reproduce and to bring forth more children through that, and of course in the process sort of create these social reproductions as well. That's so in chapter 5, it's there in this very crass way. It has the same sort of a crass dimensions in chapter 21 as well, but it's not so stated. It's important for us to see how that works. Now, presumably, the entire book of Judges is premised upon sort of creating this space for the emergence of a nation, and the sort of lamentation that there is no king. But in the whole frame of the book, what is actually seen is, in order for that sort of nation to come together, women will play a critical role, and one of the critical roles that they play is through a very high price of their bodies, and the way in which now women are in some ways seen as valuable entities, but yet at the very same time excluded and marginalized from a central sort of either leadership or even acknowledgement of their contributions. So it's the sense of we could just grab and steal women or force women to participate in ways in the society that goes against them. Now, what I'm describing here in many ways are strong patriarchal values that are at work. One of the things to notice is how the negotiations or setting things up for the benefit of men is a primary factor here. So the lamentation around Benjamin is the fact that the men do not have women, and how we could fix that in the interest of men, and you do that by getting other women. There is a feel here, and it's not as elegant as some would, where there is this kind of a male order bride type of scenario, where men are on the frontier, are facing the fact that the only way they could push forward into the frontier and do so in a sustainable way is to have women, and the only way they could have these women is to just order them through the mail, and they come delivered. There is that sort of a historical set of connections that we could bring here. But in this instance, these women are captured through war and deceit and force and all of these other things to serve that need. Again, what we're seeing here is how male needs are being served. And primarily, the other place to pay attention to is the kind of way in which the men of Shiloh are being told, look, just give up the women. It's in your interest. There's of course the subtle threat to the men. You could give them up easily and peacefully, or you could do so forcefully. But in any event, we would prefer to convince you that this is in your interest as well as in our own interest for us to have these women. Again, a strong endorsement of a world that is going to be shaped by men, for men, to support the interests of men, and of course women will continue to do that. Let me pause there for questions or comments, and I'll stop share for a while and see what questions people may have. Ira?
Okay, so far nothing in the chat, so we will, if anyone wants to hop in, I think we can try that and see how that works.
I'll hop in.
Okay.
Alan? I was
Morning.
just about to type, but my basic fundamental question is, when the group that comes to confront the evildoers, and they say, you know, you've done these horrible things, you know, let's give us the perpetrators and we'll, you know, be on our way, kind of thing. Was it because of the incensement, you know, of the body parts that just wouldn't be satisfying, and therefore they just kept rolling? Or, you know, what sort of caused that tipping point, you know, the first Sesame Street moment, basically?
I'm glad you take you're taking with my image. So yeah, so there's a strong defense of the men of Gibeah by I think I'm trying to get together out.
21.
So it's in chapter 20. Hand over the scoundrels around verse 13. We will put them to death, purge the evil. But they would not listen to their kinsfolk. There is no reason given for it. Now, you could conclude that there is some kind of an ethnic solidarity that's taking place here, because, you know, in the atmosphere of this chapter is the specter of who. Let's figure out who is with us and who is against us. So you have these various tribal groups, and there is this attempt in some way to make sure that we could bring ourselves to cohesion. The Benjaminites in some ways are basically saying, no, we don't share the same outlook on this issue as you do. And we will not hand over, and therefore we will close ranks among ourselves. We prefer to close ranks among ourselves than act against some of our own in your interest. It's those types of tensions that are there. And we saw that in some ways in chapter 19, where the Levite has this perception that the Jebusites, the people of Jerusalem, are not friendly, but my people are friendly, and my people will let me in. And he doesn't get let in, and you know, he instead finds solidarity with someone from Ephraim. So Benjamin has already been set up to be shown as, these people are really, they are part of us, but they're really not part of us. And when the time comes, they will close ranks among themselves against us. There are some people who believe this is an important phase for us to understand what happens later on in Samuel related to Saul. Because Saul is from the tribe of Benjamin. The Gibeah is his hometown and all of that, but you know, that's another story.
Okay, there's a few questions in the chat. I don't know, Steed, if you want to look at those and address those, if you're able to see.
Yeah, I'm looking at the numbers. Yeah, I always tell people, be very cautious about numbers in the Bible, because they may not be accurate. Sometimes they are. Sometimes they do represent a serious attempt to count. Yeah, 400,000 is awfully large. I don't think that there were that number of people. And I mean, if any of you have a sense of the geographic area that we're dealing with, we know that the carrying capacity even now would not sustain this group, far less several thousand years ago. So don't trust the numbers in some sense. The point they want to make is it's an exaggeration for effect, that yeah, we really tried, or they brought everything out to make this happen. Mm-hmm.
And then the other question about why the Benjaminites wanted to humiliate the Levite in the first place.
Yeah, we don't have a sense of the motivation for it. One of the things that we do get is the characterization of the men who bring this demand in chapter 19, I think depending upon your translation, you will get the gentle word calling them scoundrels. But the Hebrew characterizes them as kind of sons of evil, if you wish. That in some ways, basically hinting, yeah, these men are intrinsically evil. That's sort of I think the NRSV calls them a perverse lot. They were wicked, they were worthless, good for nothing, and literally sons of no, they belong to Yael. Yael is the thing. So there's already the characterization that's who these people are. The Benjaminites are perverse, and hence you could understand why in the opening of chapter 21 there is the commitment. No, we will not let our daughters get married to them, because that's who they are.
Great. Jolie, did you want to amplify your comment at all about Margaret Atwood?
There are a lot of her storyline that fit in the book of Judges and what we've been reading about, and the capturing of women for all kinds of purposes to serve men. And it's just interesting that I happen to be reading that now.
Great.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I wasn't, I heard about the Testament and haven't. I mean, so what Margaret Atwood, I didn't realize that she built it off of this chapter as well. I mean, what she is good at doing is taking these innocuous sort of forgotten biblical stories and then spinning them like that. So The Handmaid's Tale is a riff off of Genesis and the Hagar story, where Sarah brings Hagar to Abraham and says, look, go into my handmaid and have children with her. Hence the handmaid stuff. But what you're pointing out there, the sense of women being taken for these various purposes is quite striking, and we have to in some ways, because one of the things I think Margaret Atwood does is to bring us to a place where we frightfully admit this is a serious possibility at a normal level, because I don't think she is spending time to convince anyone that this happens out of sight. What I think she's trying to raise is, if we don't address a number of the particular cultural values, it's quite easy to see communities moving in that direction. In fact, we're not as far away in terms of the values of a society that could perpetuate and normalize those types of behaviors. We're not that far from that society. Some of the things that she's pointing to.
Susan Graham, did you want to elaborate, or?
Well, no, what I wrote is what I thought. I just think, the fact that last night we elected our first Black Asian woman as vice president, and how many years has from this story it's taken us to get to this point, that, we still struggle with the value of women. It's just a statement.
Great.
Yeah. Yes. I agree with you, Susan. And the struggle for the value of women, because as much as we would like to think that there are these sort of, one would want to call advanced cultures, you know, basically one has to ask the question where you would hear statements like, well, what little girl doesn't dream of the day she gets married? What little girl isn't thinking about her wedding dress? And those statements are made to suggest it is natural. But those aren't natural impulses. Those are cultural impulses. That is, girls are socialized into thinking that that getting married, and with all of the stuff around wedding dresses, because I mean, in the ancient world, no girl, even though they knew their fate was ultimately just to have children, there were no wedding dresses and all of this, the sorts of things, or father walking you down the aisle and all of that sort of thing. All of these are cultural expressions. And so in some ways, what you have is a socialization of girls to say, this is your ultimate role in life. And if that is happening, we better well know that alongside of that is a socialization of boys to think about girls in that way. So while boys are kind of being socialized in ways in terms of what their fate and the outcome of the shape of their lives will look like, there is the both explicit and implicit socialization, and this is how girls will fit into this. So it's not just simply a question of what is happening with boys. So Susan, your comment is it has taken that long time because it's both the sense of women being convinced about what is possible, but also men in some ways being convinced about what is possible, because many of these cultural ideas have exercised a significant and dominant way of suppressing the capacities of all people to rise to something more than we have been able to experience.
You know, one thing that came up for me, just to throw it out there, see what folks think, is in Jewish tradition, long time, not just modern reform, in a Jewish wedding ceremony, it's both parents walk down both the bride and the groom. First, the parents of the groom walk down the groom, then the parents of the bride, both of them walk down the bride. There's no giving away by the father. There's also a marriage contract called the ketubah in Jewish practice, which is again long-standing. There's laws about the right of a woman to seek a divorce, which I think was pretty progressive for its day. I think what I struggle with is that, you know, a lot of that stuff, you know, doesn't go as far as we would, you know, expect now. But, you know, given the context, what you're talking about, it appears to me that it's more egalitarian than people assume, or because I think a lot of times people look at religions like Judaism or maybe other religions too and say, oh, it's sexist because the women are kept apart from the men and the women are given very prescribed roles. But others will say that, you know, for its context, it was pretty progressive in terms of how women were treated. I wonder if the sages later on, the rabbis who developed those laws about and rituals, looked at stories like this as a kind of a guide, a more feminist guide than, for again, in context, than we might expect. I don't know. I'm not a scholar, so I don't really know about that, but I do know those rituals.
Yeah, well, thanks for providing those details. I do think that even within ancient narratives and sort of ancient a context, we will see some inclines towards a kind of a more progressive set of practices. That there would be the exceptions. So for instance, even though this is a heavily patriarchal culture, in chapter 19, we see this woman who is in this relationship in the household of the Levite. She leaves. And we don't know what the reason is for her leaving, but from all indications, a woman doesn't leave a household. And so that we're reading a story that shows her leaving and him having to try to get her back. We're looking at something that's somewhat exceptional from the norm, even for that time. So there are those types of indications as well, and we will see even in the biblical text we tend to see them. So I want people to hear that there are these, what you call, Ira, kind of sexist impulses or sexist norms within these systems, but they're not complete. And they have always been places where they fracture fairly easily.
And Don, thank you. Don Ball, it sounds like maybe you were making a related point. I don't know. Is that fair to say? If you want to go on mute, or we'll just move on, whatever you prefer. Lucy, you mentioned Nanette Sawyer's book talk. Do we know if that's online, the recording?
Yeah, you can get it. And I think there is a chapter in that book that is so incredibly powerful about women and lynching. It kind of made me like really, really upset. The whole book is very challenging and very powerful, but particularly Dr. Davidson around the whole thing about women being bought, women being carried off into slavery, and then the role of women standing up against the lynching culture in our country. And I couldn't help but, as you were speaking, just think that not all that much has changed, at least into the 20th century, and hopefully we'll be able to turn the tide. But strongly encourage people to join that study. You can just go out online and go to Adult Ed and look at, not study, but Nanette will be doing 2 book talks on that particular text.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks. I mean, so there are those legacies of the capture of women that we could also pay attention to and talk about. Certainly, when we read texts like these, we cannot overlook the fact that there have been the histories where enslaved women were just available as sexual outlets and as outlets for reproduction for enslavers. This is a deep and lasting legacy that has in many parts of the world, and the ways in which those women were treated, discarded, their children then either selectively taken to become or integrated into certain things to perpetuate the heritage of the fathers. Those are things that we ought never to forget. And one of the things I'm looking at is how we come to see these, the logic of those types of more disturbing practices, how some of those logics become normalized in different types, in different places. So I'm looking at Don Ball's comment on the sort of social security. So certainly within this historical context, there is not the social security part of it would be more about the lineage rather than than kind of having someone to take care of you in old age. Even at my age, if I lived in that time period, I either would have been dead or just be among a very minor group of persons who would have been alive. People did not live. I think the sort of records that we could, evidence we have, women didn't live past their 30s per se, and men didn't live past their 40s as such. Women life expectancy was shorter, primarily because many of them, the multiple births, and may die as a result of childbirth, and men, of course, from one way or the other, would die. So this is not so that you have somebody who would take care of you, but it's that someone would pass your genes on and continue. So which is what I would talk about, the physical and social reproduction. There's the anxiety over the fact that you are aware that you will not live forever, and you want to transmit your genetic material to another generation. But also, when we're reading narratives like these, the anxiety is not just over the physical. The anxiety is over is the kind of social formation, the faith, the belief system that we have. We want that transmitted as well. So we need bodies to keep that going and to sustain that. So important for us to see how one of the sort of functions of texts like these is to call us into some measure of agreement, so that it could transmit its values from one way or the other. That we have only, which gets to Suzanne's point, it's only within the last 20, 30 years or so that there is a loud outcry about the ways in which Judges has been interpreted, that we've started to look more closely at the fate of women in the books. But most of the commentaries were more or less just concerned with, why is there no king in Israel? What is this saying? This is justifying the need for a king? Oh, in the end of the 19th century, Susan Cady Stanton's sort of her work on this, on her Women's Bible commentary that she produces, Susan Cady Stanton is one of those voices that we're seeing raising questions about the way in which women are portrayed in the book. But it takes a very long time for some of that to rise to any level of acceptance. And of course, Stanton would have been either dismissed or seen as a woman who was just too bothersome to be dealing with. So very important how values that are encoded in text are in some ways presenting themselves as in need of being sustained and transmitted from one generation to the next, even as we are seeing the stories of these anxieties about how our community would die out, and the only way to sustain it is through these very strong, in some ways, misogynistic type of behaviors.
Professor Davidson, you made a comment in the first session, I believe, but you didn't explore it, but it sounded very interesting about how undeveloped or early societies, or societies in their earliest stage, and maybe I'm wrong here, I got you wrong, but societies in their earlier stages are more apt to give roles of responsibility and reverence to women than societies in their more developed stages. And because I think you were talking about Deborah as a judge, it seemed counterintuitive to me, because it seemed like, well, the more developed a society is, the more rights women are given. But when you said that, I thought, that's interesting, and maybe you can elaborate on that a little bit more.
So one of the things I would say is we always have to look at look at the relative power a woman wields in a household. If you look at a working class household versus a wealthy household, look at the relative power that the woman has there. It is the working class woman who is much more powerful in that household than the woman in the wealthy household. Because the working class woman is in many ways doing stuff like she is earning income. She is making decisions about how money is being spent. She's making a whole number of decisions regarding the future of the family. And you go up the income ladder. That's not the same thing. And in fact, that working class woman is a much more public figure than the wealthy woman. It is so that the more that there are resources, the more they're developed. Men have a greater role in controlling those resources, and women tend to be excluded. But when the resources are scarce, the capacity of women to be involved in leadership and decision making about those resources, that has increased. That's the difference, and it's an important distinction to make, so that the perception that it's because women are working outside of the home, why the family is disintegrating, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Well, you have to ask yourself, who has the luxury to have a single income? It's wealthy household that could exist on a single income. Much poorer households have always had to exist on multiple incomes. And those women have always been working outside of the home, and have always been occupying public spaces, and always been involved in that. So there is this very sort of elitist narrative that is being invoked to apply across the board in places where it never existed and doesn't make sense. So you have people torturing themselves into this thing about women's place in the home, or women, being stay-at-home mothers, and all of this sort of a thing, not recognizing that what you're dealing with is not just simply a matter of gender and the way in which gender is practiced, but it is also an economic reality, right? So again, when a number of Black women start to raise the question of, we have to do some very serious intersectional conversations here, that's the point that they're making. That's the point that for say Black women, the way in which Black women have to move and operate in the society has to do with economics, has to do with politics, has to do with gender, and those things can't be pried apart from one way or the other.
All right, thank you. We're a little past our time, but if anyone else has any other concluding comments or questions, and I'll keep this open a little bit in case anyone else wants to say anything, and kind of recreate the in-person experience where people just kind of stay after a little bit. But Professor Davidson, this is, as Lucy said, this has really been a wonderful course. Who knew that the topic of women and judges would be so produce such fruitful and provocative discussion, and we really appreciate your taking the time with us to be with us these last few weeks. And for all of you too who joined us, thank you. And we hope to see you at future classes. Please sign up for those classes, and sign up for our mailing list as well on the website that I posted the link to. So thank you all. and hope to see you at future classes. And you too, Professor Davidson. We hope you come back and propose more classes for us. We appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for
Thank
having
Thank
me.
you, Dr. Davidson.